The nursery was already painted a soft, calming shade of sage green. The crib was assembled, draped in imported linens, waiting for a baby that was due in just 2 months. But the silence in the penthouse wasn't peaceful. It was deafening. When billionaire Ethan Caldwell walked through the door of his Manhattan apartment that Tuesday evening, expecting his wife's quiet greeting, he found nothing but a diamond ring sitting on the cold marble of the kitchen island and a single, handwritten note. His mistress, Sienna, thought this was her victory lap. She thought the obstacle was finally gone, but she was about to learn a brutal lesson. Be careful what you wish for, because when a pregnant woman vanishes into thin air, the husband is always the first suspect, and the other woman never gets the fairy tale ending she thinks she deserves. Ethan Caldwell was a man who controlled everything. As the CEO of Caldwell Holdings, he moved markets with a whisper and crushed competitors with a signature. He was used to noise, the roar of the trading floor, the paparazzi flashes, the demanding notifications on his phone. But tonight, the silence in his triplex penthouse on the Upper East Side terrified him. He loosened his tie, the silk feeling like a noose. It was 8:00 p.m. Usually the smell of roasted chicken or something savory would be wafting from the kitchen. Clara, his wife of 4 years, insisted on cooking dinner herself, despite the staff he offered to hire. She was 7 months pregnant, heavy on her feet, and usually spent her evenings reading on the chaotic plush sofa she loved, a sofa Ethan hated because it didn't match the modern aesthetic. "Clara," he called out. His voice echoed off the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. Nothing. He checked his phone. 3 missed texts from Sienna. "Are you home yet, baby? I'm wearing that red set you bought me. Don't make me wait." Ethan swiped the notification away with a grimace. The affair with Sienna, a 24-year-old Instagram model with ambitions bigger than her follower count, had been a cliché. It was a distraction, a way to feel powerful in a different way. Clara was safe, boring, reliable. Sienna was fire and chaos. He thought he could handle both. He walked into the kitchen. That's when he saw it. His grandmother's ring. A 3-carat vintage diamond he had placed on Clara's finger 5 years ago. It was sitting in the center of the island, next to a piece of folded cream stationery. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He picked up the note. It wasn't a letter. It was a single sentence, written in Clara's neat, looping cursive. "I'm tired of being the only one who is faithful in this house." That was it. No goodbye. No threats. Just a statement of fact. "Clara!" Ethan screamed, running toward the master bedroom. The room was pristine. He threw open the walk-in closet. Her side was confusing. Her expensive gowns, the ones he bought her for galas, were all there. Her jewelry box was full. But the comfortable clothes, the oversized sweaters, the maternity leggings, gone. He ran to the bathroom. Her toothbrush was missing. Her prenatal vitamins were gone. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through his arrogance. He pulled out his phone and dialed her number. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." He dialed again. Same result. She hadn't just turned it off. She had disconnected the line. Ethan stood in the center of the bedroom, breathing hard. He was Ethan Caldwell. People didn't leave him. He left them. His phone buzzed. It was Sienna again. "Ethan, stop ignoring me. You said she'd be asleep by 10. Can I come over?" A wave of nausea hit him. He looked at the empty bed, the one Clara made every morning. For the first time in months, the thought of Sienna didn't arouse him. It made him want to vomit. He didn't reply. Instead, he did the only thing he could think of. He called the head of security for his building. "Check the cameras," Ethan barked, his voice trembling. I need to know when my wife left." "Mr. Caldwell," the security chief's voice was hesitant. We already checked. The system went down for maintenance between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. today. There's no footage." Ethan dropped the phone. The device cracked against the hardwood floor. She knew. Clara knew everything. And she hadn't just left. She had executed an exit so clean it was surgical. The boring wife he had taken for granted had just pulled off the impossible. She had disappeared. 36 hours. That's how long it had been since Ethan found the note. The penthouse was no longer silent. It was crawling with police. Detective Marcus Vance, no relation to Clara, ironically, was sitting on the sofa Ethan hated, looking entirely too comfortable. Vance was a veteran detective with the NYPD, a man who had seen enough rich men kill their wives to fill a library of case files. "So, let me get this straight, Mr. Caldwell," Vance said, not looking up from his notepad. "Your wife, 7 months pregnant, packs a bag, disconnects her phone, disables the building's security cameras, and leaves without a trace. And you have no idea why." Ethan sat in the armchair across from him. He hadn't slept. He looked haggard, his designer suit wrinkled. "I told you, I came home and she was gone. The note said she was unhappy." "Unhappy," Vance repeated flatly. He looked up, his eyes sharp. "Did she have a reason to be unhappy? Was there tension? Infidelity?" Ethan froze. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. We were having normal marital issues. Stress with the baby coming. "Right," Vance said, standing up. "We'll need access to your financials, your phone records, and your emails. Standard procedure for a missing person case where foul play hasn't been ruled out." "Foul play?" Ethan stood up, indignant. "She left me. She wrote a note." "Handwriting can be forged, Mr. Caldwell, and pregnant women don't usually just walk away from top-tier healthcare and financial security unless they are running from something or someone." Vance's implication hung heavy in the air. As the police were leaving, the elevator doors opened. Ethan's stomach dropped. It was Sienna. She wasn't reading the room. She was wearing a trench coat that was belted tightly, oversized sunglasses, and carrying a bag of takeout. She looked like she was auditioning for the role of supportive wife. "Ethan!" she cried out, rushing past a uniformed officer. "I was so worried. You haven't answered my texts in 2 days." Detective Vance stopped at the door. He turned slowly, a predator spotting wounded prey. He looked at Sienna, then back at Ethan. "And who is this?" Vance asked, his voice deceptively light. Ethan closed his eyes. This was the moment his life officially fractured. "I'm a close friend," Sienna said quickly, pulling down her sunglasses. She looked at the police presence, her eyes widening. "Is everything okay? Is it Clara?" "Who are you?" Vance asked again, stepping closer. "Sienna. Sienna Miller," she said, flipping her hair. "I work with Ethan. Occasionally." Vance smirked. It was a cold, ugly look. "I see. Well, Miss Miller, don't leave town. We might have some questions for the close friends of the family." Once the door clicked shut behind the police, the silence returned. But this time it was filled with tension. Ethan turned on Sienna, his face red with rage. "What the hell are you doing here?" Sienna recoiled, hurt flashing across her perfectly made-up face. "I came to comfort you. I saw the news. They say she's missing. Ethan, this is it. Don't you see?" She walked over, placing a hand on his chest. "She's gone. You don't have to file for divorce. We don't have to hide anymore." Ethan looked at her hand as if it were a spider. He grabbed her wrist and shoved it away. "My wife is missing, Sienna. My unborn child is missing, and the police think I did something to her. Do you understand how this looks? You showing up here?" I don't care how it looks, Sienna shouted back, her mask of sweetness slipping. I care about us. She obviously knew about us, Ethan. That note? She left because of me. She knew she couldn't compete. Sienna walked around the living room, running her hand along the back of Clara's favorite sofa. Honestly, maybe it's for the best. She was so plain. She didn't fit in your world. I do. Ethan watched her. He really looked at her. For the first time, he didn't see the glamour or the excitement. He saw a vulture circling a carcass. Get out, Ethan whispered. What? Get out, he roared, picking up a crystal vase from the table and hurling it at the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, just like his composure. Get out of my house, Sienna. If you come back here, I will have security throw you out. Sienna's eyes filled with tears. Angry tears. You're upset. I get it. I'll give you space. But don't think you can just push me away, Ethan. I know things. I know where the bodies are buried. She turned and stormed out, her heels clicking loudly on the marble. Ethan sank onto the floor, surrounded by broken glass. He put his head in his hands. I'm tired of being the only one who is faithful in this house. The words burned into his brain. He needed to find her. Not to save his reputation, not to avoid jail, but because for the first time in years, the absence of Clara Vance felt like the loss of a limb. He pulled out his phone again. He didn't call the police. He called a number he hadn't used in a decade. Liam, Ethan said when the line connected. I need you. I need the best private investigator money can buy, and I need it off the books. What's the job? Liam asked, his voice gravelly. Find my wife, Ethan said, his voice breaking, before the police find out the truth about why she left. But Ethan didn't know that Clara wasn't just hiding. She was watching, and the game had only just begun. The press descended on the Caldwell building like a swarm of locusts. By day 3, the sidewalk outside the penthouse was impassable. O.B. vans from CNN, Fox News, and every major network were parked in illegal spots, accruing tickets they would happily pay for the shot of the grieving billionaire. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Ethan sat at his dining table, which was now covered in files. Across from him sat Liam, the private investigator. Liam was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite, rough, weathered, and unshakable. He was the antithesis of Ethan's corporate, polished world. You're not going to like this, Liam said, sliding a thick folder across the mahogany surface. Ethan rubbed his temples. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. Just tell me, did you find a flight manifest? A train ticket? No, Liam said, lighting a cigarette. Ethan usually forbade smoking in the penthouse, but today he didn't care. I found a ghost. Your wife didn't just decide to leave on Tuesday, Ethan. She's been leaving you for 6 months. Ethan froze. What? Look at the bank transfers. Liam pointed a calloused finger at the spreadsheet. Small amounts. Under the radar. 2,000 here, 3,000 there. Cash withdrawals at different ATMs across the tri-state area. But she didn't use her cards. She used a supplementary card attached to your corporate expense account, the one you never check because your accountant handles it. Ethan squinted at the numbers. That's nearly $200,000. Cash, Liam confirmed. Untraceable. But that's not the genius part. The genius part is the digital footprint she left behind. Liam opened a laptop and turned the screen toward Ethan. It showed a series of search histories and emails. I had my tech guy scrub the router logs. For the last 3 months, someone in this house has been researching non-extradition countries, how to fake a death, and, this is the kicker, spousal abuse support groups. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. I never hit her. You know that. I never laid a hand on her. I believe you, Liam said, his voice low. But the police won't, and the public definitely won't. She planted a narrative, Ethan. If she turns up dead, or if she never turns up at all, this search history makes you look like a monster who drove her to it. Or worse, someone who killed her to shut her up. Ethan stood up, pacing the room frantically. Why? Why would she do this? Just because I slept with Sienna? Hell hath no fury, Liam muttered. But there's something else. We found a purchase order for a storage unit in Queens, paid for in cash, but the rental agreement had a fingerprint on it. We're checking it now. Before Ethan could respond, the TV in the corner, which had been muted on a news channel, flashed a familiar face. Ethan grabbed the remote and unmuted it. It was Sienna. She wasn't hiding. She was sitting in a studio for an exclusive interview with a prime-time talk show host. She wore a modest black dress, her makeup minimal to make her look younger, more innocent. I just want her to come home, Sienna was saying to the camera, wiping away a tear. Ethan, Mr. Caldwell and I, we were just colleagues. But I know how stressed he was. Clara was unstable. She was jealous. I think she might have done something to herself to punish him. Ethan stared at the screen, his mouth agape. She's insane. She's implicating me to save herself. She's controlling the narrative, Liam corrected. She's painting Clara as the crazy one and herself as the innocent bystander. But in doing so, she's giving the police a motive for you to kill Clara. To get rid of the unstable wife for the younger mistress. Ethan threw the remote at the TV. It cracked the screen right down the middle of Sienna's face. Get to that storage unit, Ethan snarled at Liam. Find out what Clara hid there. I need leverage. Now. 400 miles away, in a small, drafty cabin on the outskirts of Burlington, Vermont, a woman named Emily sat by the fire. She looked nothing like Clara Caldwell. Clara was a blonde socialite with a blowout and manicured nails. Emily had short, jaggedly cut, jet black hair. She wore oversized flannel shirts and thick wool socks. Her face was devoid of makeup, revealing the freckles Clara had spent years covering with expensive foundation. But the eyes were the same, sharp, calculating. Emily, Clara, sipped her herbal tea and watched the live stream of Sienna's interview on her tablet. A small, cold smile touched her lips. Stupid girl, Clara whispered to the screen. You always did talk too much. She shifted in her chair, rubbing her swollen belly. The baby kicked, a strong, reassuring thud against her ribs. Don't worry, little one, she cooed. Daddy isn't going to hurt us. Daddy isn't going to ignore us anymore. Clara had been planning this since the day she found the second phone. It was 6 months ago. Ethan had left his gym bag in the hallway. She had picked it up to have the maid wash his clothes, and a burner phone had fallen out. She didn't confront him. She didn't scream. She simply unlocked it. His passcode was always 12 or 34. The arrogance of a man who thought he was untouchable and read everything. The texts from Sienna were graphic. They were mocking. Does the whale suspect anything? Sienna had written when Clara was 4 months pregnant. No, she's too busy nesting. She's clueless, Ethan had replied. That word, clueless. It broke something inside Clara. It wasn't the heartbreak of betrayal. It was the cold clarity of realization. She had sacrificed her career in journalism to be his wife. She had managed his social calendar, charmed his investors, and built his image. And he saw her as a clueless incubator. So, she went back to her roots. She stopped being the wife and started being the investigative journalist she used to be. She documented everything. Not just the affair. That was child's play. She documented the business. Caldwell Holdings was successful, yes, but Ethan had been cutting corners to keep the stock price inflated. Clara found the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. She found the emails proving he was bribing city officials to approve his construction permits. She found the tax evasion schemes. She printed it all. The storage unit in Queens that Ethan's PI was currently racing toward? It was a trap. Clara checked her watch. 2:00 p.m. "Boom," she whispered. She picked up her burner phone and dialed a number she had memorized weeks ago. "Detective Vance?" she said, pitching her voice higher, adding a tremor of fear. "Who is this?" the detective barked. I can't say my name, but I know where Ethan Caldwell keeps his records, the real ones. He told me to burn them, but I was too scared." "Where?" Vance demanded. "A storage unit in Queens, Unit 404. Please just don't tell him I called." She hung up and removed the SIM card, snapping it in half and throwing it into the fire. She watched the plastic melt and curl. Ethan thought this was about a divorce. He thought this was about a scorned woman leaving a ring on a counter. He had no idea. This wasn't a breakup. This was a demolition. Clara stood up and walked to the window. The snow was falling heavily outside, covering the world in white. It was peaceful. She wasn't going to stay hidden forever. But when she returned, she wouldn't be Clara Caldwell, the victim. She would be the woman who brought down the Caldwell empire. The raid on the storage unit happened at 4:00 p.m. Liam arrived 10 minutes too late. When he pulled up in his nondescript sedan, the facility was already swarming with NYPD. He saw Detective Vance walking out of Unit 404 carrying boxes. Liam swore under his breath and dialed Ethan. "Don't talk," Liam said. "Just listen. The police beat us to the storage unit. And Ethan, they aren't carrying out baby clothes. They're carrying out bankers' boxes. Do you have anything in storage you shouldn't?" Ethan, sitting in his office at Caldwell Holdings, felt his stomach drop. "I don't have a storage unit. I told you that." "Well, someone rented one in your name. And whatever is in there, Vance looks like he just won the lottery." 10 minutes later, the doors to Ethan's corner office burst open. It wasn't the police yet. It was his chief legal officer, frantic. "Ethan, the SEC just froze our assets." "What?" Ethan stood up, his chair toppling over. "On what grounds?" "Anonymous tip, coupled with evidence recovered by the NYPD regarding financial irregularities tied to a missing persons case. Ethan, the stock is in free fall. It's down 12% in the last hour. The board is calling an emergency meeting. They want you to step down pending the investigation." "Step down?" Ethan roared. "I built this company. This is my name on the building. And right now, your name is toxic," the lawyer shouted back, losing his composure. "Your pregnant wife is missing. Your mistress is giving interviews on talk shows. And now the feds are looking at our books. You need to leave the building. Now, before the press gets wind of the SEC freeze." Ethan grabbed his coat and ran for the private elevator. He needed to get home. He needed to think. But when he got to the lobby, the police were waiting. Detective Vance stood in front of the revolving doors, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. The lobby fell silent. Employees stopped, phones raised, recording the downfall of a titan. "Ethan Caldwell," Vance said, his voice booming. "We'd like you to come down to the station to answer some questions." "Am I under arrest?" Ethan asked, straightening his tie, trying to maintain a shred of dignity. "Not yet," Vance smiled tightly. "But we found a diary in the storage unit, a diary belonging to your wife. It details some very disturbing threats you made to her, about what would happen if she ever tried to expose your business practices." "That's a lie," Ethan shouted, looking around at the cameras pointing at him. "I never wrote that. She forged it." "You can explain that to the DA," Vance said. "Please, sir. Don't make a scene." Ethan was escorted out of his own building, not in handcuffs, but he might as well have been. The flashing lights of the paparazzi blinded him. As he was shoved into the back of the police cruiser, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He managed to glance at it before the officer told him to put it away. It was a text from an unknown number. "How does it feel to be the one who is helpless?" There was an image attached. It was a photo of him, taken just seconds ago, being led into the police car. Ethan stared at the screen. The angle was high. It was taken from a building across the street. She was here. She wasn't in a ditch. She wasn't dead. Clara was watching him. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Caldwell didn't feel anger. He felt pure, unadulterated terror. He looked up at the buildings surrounding him, searching the windows for a flash of blonde hair, but saw nothing but glass and steel. Meanwhile, back at the penthouse, Sienna was panicking. She had watched the arrest on TV. The supportive friend act wasn't going to work anymore. If Ethan went down for murder or fraud, she got nothing. No money. No fame. Just the reputation of being the mistress of a convict. She needed a new plan. She went to Ethan's safe in the bedroom. She knew the combination because she had watched him open it once, while he thought she was sleeping. She spun the dial, left to 10, right to 25, left to 88. Click. The heavy door swung open. Inside were stacks of cash, some watches, and a velvet pouch. Sienna grabbed the cash, about $50,000, better than nothing. She reached for the velvet pouch, expecting diamonds. She dumped the contents into her hand. It wasn't jewelry. It was a USB drive, and a small note attached to it. The note was written in Clara's handwriting, but it wasn't addressed to Ethan. For Sienna. "Since you like taking things that belong to me, take this. It's the only thing that can save you from prison when the police realize you were his accomplice." Sienna's hands trembled. Accomplice? She ran to Ethan's laptop and plugged in the drive. A video file popped up. Sienna clicked play. The video was grainy. It was footage from a hidden camera in the bedroom. It showed Ethan and Sienna in bed weeks ago. But the audio was clear. "I hate her, Sienna," Ethan's voice on the recording said. "I wish she would just disappear. It would make everything easier with the merger if she was just gone." "Then make her gone," Sienna's voice replied. She remembered saying it. She had been drunk, joking. "Hire someone. I don't care. Just get rid of her." Sienna stared at the screen, horror washing over her. Taken out of context, it sounded like a conspiracy to commit murder. Clara had recorded them. She had edited it, and she had left it for Sienna to find. Sienna realized with a sickening thud that she wasn't a player in this game. She was a pawn, and Clara was about to sacrifice her to checkmate the king. The interrogation room at the 19th precinct smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Sienna Miller sat at the metal table, her hands shaking so hard the water in her paper cup rippled. Opposite her sat Detective Vance and a district attorney named Helen Sharp, a woman known in New York legal circles as the Butcher for how she carved up white-collar criminals. "I didn't do it," Sienna stammered, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know he was going to kill her. I thought he was venting." Sharp leaned forward, her eyes cold. "Ms. Miller, we have a recording of you telling Ethan Caldwell to make her gone. We have you discussing hiring a hitman. In the state of New York, conspiracy to commit murder carries a sentence of up to 25 years. You're 24. You'll be 50 when you get out. Your looks will be gone. Your youth will be gone." Sienna sobbed harder. The reality of her situation was crashing down. She wasn't the billionaire's girlfriend anymore. She was an accessory. "Unless," Sharp said, softening her voice, offering a lifeline. "Unless you give us something else." Sienna looked up, mascara running down her cheeks. "What?" "I don't have anything else." "We know about the fraud," Vance interjected. "We know about the offshore accounts, but those financial webs are complex. It could take us years to untangle them, and Caldwell has high-priced lawyers who will delay us until the end of time. We need a witness. We need someone who saw him moving the money, someone who saw him forging the documents." Sienna hesitated. She didn't know the technical details, but she knew where he kept the ledger. She knew who he met with. She knew about the secret meetings at the St. Regis Hotel with the city council members. "If I tell you," Sienna whispered, "do I go to prison?" "You get immunity on the conspiracy charge," Sharp said, "and a reduced sentence for any financial complicity. You might do 18 months in a minimum security facility instead of 25 years in maximum." Sienna closed her eyes. She thought of Ethan. She thought of how he had screamed at her in the apartment, how he had looked at her with disgust when the police arrived. He didn't love her. He never had. "Okay," Sienna said, her voice trembling. "I'll tell you everything." While Sienna was singing like a canary, Ethan Caldwell was sitting in a holding cell at Rikers Island, experiencing a new kind of hell. He had been denied bail. The judge, citing his immense wealth, his access to private jets, and the mysterious disappearance of his wife, deemed him a massive flight risk. Ethan Caldwell, the man who slept on 1,000 thread-count Egyptian cotton sheets, was now sleeping on a thin cot that smelled of bleach and urine. His lawyer, Arthur Sterling, a man whose retainer cost more than most people's houses, visited him on the third day. Sterling looked grim. "It's bad, Ethan," Sterling said, not bothering to sit. "Get me out of here, Arthur," Ethan snapped, slamming his hand against the plexiglass barrier. "I didn't kill her. She's out there. She's framing me." "The murder charge is actually the least of your worries right now," Sterling said quietly. Sienna flipped. Ethan froze. "What?" "She cut a deal. She's giving them everything on the business. The bribery, the tax evasion, the shell companies in the Caymans. She's naming names, Ethan. The city council is already distancing themselves. The board of Caldwell Holdings voted this morning to oust you as CEO. They are suing you for breach of fiduciary duty." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. "Sienna, that little—" "She gave them the recording, Ethan," Sterling continued. "The one from the bedroom. The jury is going to hear you say you wished your pregnant wife would disappear. And then, poof, she disappears. Even if we beat the murder charge because there's no body, the fraud charges are watertight. You're looking at 40 years. Minimum." Ethan slumped back in his chair. He had built an empire. He was a king, and he had been brought down by a wife he ignored and a mistress he underestimated. "Find her," Ethan whispered, his eyes wide and manic. "Arthur, you have to find Clara. If she comes back, the murder charge drops. If she comes back, I can prove she set me up. We're trying," Sterling said, packing his briefcase. "But Ethan, she's gone. The PI you hired? Liam? He quit. He said he found evidence that she might not even be in the country anymore. She used a passport under a different name. She's a ghost." The trial began 3 months later. It was the trial of the century. Every day the courthouse steps were packed. People held signs. "Justice for Clara." "Where is the body?" Ethan sat at the defense table, gaunt and pale. He had lost 30 pounds. His expensive suits hung off him. The prosecution was ruthless. They painted a picture of a greedy, heartless tycoon who viewed his wife as a liability. They played the recording. Ethan's voice filled the silent courtroom. "I wish she would just disappear." The jury looked at him with pure hatred. Then came Sienna. She took the stand, looking small and fragile. She cried on cue. She detailed how Ethan controlled her, how he manipulated her, how he forced her to stay silent about his illegal dealings. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, and it hammered the final nail into Ethan's coffin. But the breaking point for Ethan wasn't the testimony. It was the woman in the gallery. On the 4th day of the trial, during the cross-examination of the forensic accountant, Ethan looked out into the sea of faces in the courtroom. In the back row, wearing a large hat and sunglasses, sat a woman. She tilted her head, just slightly, a gesture Clara used to make when she was bored at his business dinners. Ethan gasped, standing up so abruptly his chair clattered backward. "It's her!" he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the back of the room. "Clara, she's right there!" The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" "Grab her!" Ethan yelled, struggling as the bailiffs grabbed his arms. "That's my wife! She's alive!" Heads whipped around. The woman in the back row stood up, looking terrified. She took off her sunglasses. It wasn't Clara. It was a stranger, a brunette woman who looked nothing like her. "Sit down, Mr. Caldwell," the judge roared. "One more outburst and I will have you gagged." Ethan sagged in the bailiff's grip, staring at the woman. He could have sworn. He looked back at the doors. Just as they were closing, he saw a flash of a different figure slipping out into the hallway, a blonde figure in a trench coat. She was messing with him. She was hiring lookalikes. She was gaslighting him from the grave he dug for himself. "I'm not crazy," Ethan whispered to his lawyer, who was burying his face in his hands. "She's here." "Shut up, Ethan," Sterling hissed. "You just looked like a lunatic in front of the jury. It's over." The trial of Ethan Caldwell didn't just capture the attention of New York City, it held the entire nation hostage. It was dubbed the Billionaire's Butcher case by the tabloids, a headline that made Ethan retch every time he saw it plastered on the newsstands during his transport from the holding cell to the courthouse. For 6 months leading up to the trial, Ethan had been rotting in a high-security detention center. His world, once defined by horizons of glass and steel, private jets, and infinite possibilities, had shrunk to a 6x8 concrete box, but the courtroom was a different kind of torture. It was a theater, and he was the villain in a play he didn't realize had been written by his wife. Day 1. The Shark Tank. The courtroom was packed to capacity. The air was thick with the smell of cheap perfume, sweat, and anticipation. When Ethan walked in, flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals, the gallery erupted in a low hum of whispers. He looked at the faces, former business partners, socialites he had hosted at galas, even his own cousin, and saw nothing but judgment. They weren't there to support him. They were there to watch the king be beheaded. Ethan's lawyer, Arthur Sterling, looked tired. He was a man who usually commanded the room, but the sheer weight of evidence against them had bowed his shoulders. "Sit down and look straight ahead," Sterling hissed. "Do not react. Do not make faces. The jury is watching your every breath." District Attorney Helen Sharp stood up for her opening statement. She was a small woman with a voice that could cut glass. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. She walked back and forth in front of the jury box, making eye contact with every juror. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sharp began, her voice steady. Ethan Caldwell had it all: money, power, influence. But he wanted more. He wanted freedom from the one person who anchored him to morality. His wife, Clara. And when she became an inconvenience to his lifestyle and his illicit business dealings, he didn't just divorce her. He erased her. She pointed a finger at Ethan. It felt like a physical blow. "We may not have a body," Sharp continued, "but we have her voice. We have her diary, documenting the fear she lived in. We have the financial records, showing he was moving millions to run away with his mistress. And we have the testimony of the woman he conspired with. By the end of this trial, you will see that Ethan Caldwell isn't a businessman. He is a monster in a three-piece suit." Ethan gripped the table so hard his knuckles turned white. "Lies," he screamed internally. "It's all lies." But he remained silent. Day 14. The betrayal. The trial dragged on for weeks, a slow parade of forensic accountants and character witnesses. But the courtroom reached a fever pitch when the prosecution called their star witness. "The people call Sienna Miller to the stand." Ethan's head snapped up. The doors opened, and Sienna walked in. She was unrecognizable. The glamorous Instagram model in the red dress was gone. In her place was a broken young woman wearing a grey cardigan 2 sizes too big, her hair pulled back in a severe, messy bun, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked like a child. She looked like a victim. She refused to look at Ethan as she took the oath. "Ms. Miller," Sharp asked gently, "tell the jury about your relationship with the defendant." Sienna's voice was a whisper. "We were lovers. For 2 years." "And did Mr. Caldwell ever discuss his wife with you?" Sienna took a shaky breath. Tears began to spill down her cheeks. "Yes, all the time. He hated her. He called her the anchor, dragging him down. He said she was boring. He said he wished she was dead." "Objection!" Sterling shouted. "Hearsay!" "Overruled," the judge barked. "The witness may continue." Sienna wiped her nose with a tissue. "About a month before she disappeared, we were in bed. He was drunk. He was ranting about the divorce laws in New York, about how much money she would take if he left her. He looked at me and said, 'I wish she would just disappear. It would make everything easier with the merger if she was just gone.'" The jury gasped. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. He remembered saying that. He remembered the frustration, the scotch, the heat of the moment. It was hyperbole. It was venting. He didn't mean he was going to kill her. "And what did you say?" Sharp pressed. I made a joke," Sienna sobbed. "I said, 'Then make her gone.' I didn't think he was serious. I didn't know he was actually planning it. And then," Sharp paused for dramatic effect, "Clara Caldwell vanished. And the day she vanished, what did the defendant do?" "He called me," Sienna whispered. "He told me to come over. He said the house was quiet. He didn't sound sad. He sounded relieved." Ethan couldn't take it anymore. He stood up, his chair screeching against the floor. "You liar!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "You were the one who wanted her gone. You told me you wanted her life. You greedy little Mr. Caldwell." The judge slammed his gavel, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Sit down or I will hold you in contempt. Marshals, restrain the defendant." Ethan was forced back into his seat, panting heavily. He looked at the jury. They weren't looking at him with doubt anymore. They were looking at him with fear. He had just shown them the temper Sienna described. He had just played right into Clara's hands. Day 21. The ghost in the gallery. By the 3rd week, Ethan was unraveling. He hadn't slept more than 2 hours a night. His skin was grey, his eyes sunken. He kept replaying the events of that Tuesday over and over. How did she do it? Where did she go? During the closing arguments, Ethan was staring blankly into the gallery, scanning the sea of hostile faces. Then He saw her. In the very back row, near the exit, sat a woman. She was wearing a large, floppy hat and dark sunglasses, despite the dim lighting of the courtroom. She wore a trench coat with the collar popped high. It wasn't her appearance that stopped Ethan's heart. It was the way she sat. One leg crossed over the other, her foot tapping rhythmically in the air. Clara did that when she was impatient. Ethan blinked, rubbing his eyes. He looked again. The woman lowered her sunglasses just an inch. Blue eyes. Ice blue. Clara's eyes. She looked right at him, and then she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a shark's smile, a small, terrifying curve of the lips that said, "I got you." "It's her," Ethan whispered. Arthur Sterling leaned in. "What? It's her!" Ethan shouted, pointing a trembling finger at the back of the room. "Clara! She's right there! Look!" The entire courtroom whipped around. The cameras swiveled. The gallery murmured in confusion. The woman in the back row looked terrified. She stood up, taking off her hat and sunglasses. It wasn't Clara. It was a stranger, a brunette woman with brown eyes, looking confused and frightened by the sudden attention. "What? Who?" "Me," the woman stammered. Ethan's jaw dropped. No, she was blonde. She had blue eyes. She was just there. "Mr. Caldwell," the judge said, his voice dripping with exhaustion. "This is the second time you have disrupted my courtroom with these theatrics. There is no Clara Caldwell here. If you are trying to plead insanity, you are doing a very poor job of it." Ethan slumped into his chair, burying his face in his hands. He wasn't crazy. He knew what he saw. She had been there. She had worn a wig. She had switched seats. Or maybe he was going crazy. That was the moment Ethan realized he had lost. It didn't matter what the verdict was. She was in his head. She was haunting him while she was still alive. Verdict: the jury deliberated for only 4 hours. A speedy verdict is almost always a guilty verdict. When they returned, the foreman, a middle-aged schoolteacher, refused to look at Ethan. "On the count of wire fraud, how do you find the defendant?" "Guilty." "On the count of money laundering?" "Guilty." "On the count of conspiracy to commit murder?" "Guilty." The word hit Ethan like a physical weight. "Guilty." The judge wasted no time with sentencing. He looked at Ethan with utter disdain. "Ethan Caldwell, you are a man of immense privilege who used his power to destroy. You defrauded your investors of millions. You corrupted city officials. But worst of all, you conspired to end the life of your pregnant wife and unborn child. The fact that her body has never been found only adds to the cruelty of your crime. You have shown no remorse, only arrogance." The gavel rose. "I sentence you to 60 years in a federal penitentiary. You will not be eligible for parole for 40 years. May God have mercy on your soul." 60 years. Ethan did the math instantly. He was 32. He would be 92 when he saw the sun as a free man. He was dragged out of the courtroom, the flashes of the cameras blinding him, the shouts of murderer ringing in his ears. He looked for Sienna. She was being led out a side door, handcuffed, weeping. She had gotten 5 years for her role in the fraud. She had destroyed him, and she hadn't even saved herself. 2 years later, the tomb ADX Florence in Colorado is known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. It is a supermax prison designed for the worst of the worst: terrorists, spies, and high-profile criminals who cannot be trusted in the general population. Ethan Caldwell was prisoner. He lived in a soundproof cell made of poured concrete. The furniture was immobile: a concrete desk, a concrete stool, a concrete slab for a bed with a thin mattress. There was a 4-inch slit of a window that looked out only at the sky, so inmates would never know where they were within the facility. The silence was the worst part. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It pressed against his eardrums. Ethan had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow shell. He had lost his mother 6 months into his sentence. She died of a stroke, likely brought on by the stress of the trial. He wasn't allowed to attend the funeral. He had no friends. Arthur Sterling had stopped answering his letters after the appeal was denied. He spent his days doing push-ups until his arms failed, reading the same 3 books from the library cart and staring at the wall. "Mail call," a guard grunted, sliding a thin envelope through the slot in the heavy steel door. Ethan frowned. He never got mail. He picked up the envelope. It was heavy, high-quality paper, cream-colored. It smelled faintly familiar. Lavender. There was no return address. The postmark was stamped Zurich, Switzerland. Ethan sat on the edge of his bunk, his hands trembling. He tore open the seal. Inside there was a photograph and a 3-page handwritten letter. He looked at the photo first. It was a picture of a little boy, maybe a 1.5 years old. He was running through a field of wildflowers, a small soccer ball at his feet. He had dark, curly hair, Ethan's hair, but he had a smile that stopped Ethan's heart. It was Clara's smile, the same dimple on the left cheek. Ethan turned the photo over. On the back, in neat cursive, was written, "Leo, 18 months. Leo, his son." Ethan felt a sob catch in his throat. He unfolded the letter. The handwriting was elegant, looped, and painfully familiar. "Hello, Ethan. I imagine you have a lot of time on your hands these days. I thought it was finally time to give you some closure. You hate unanswered questions, after all. You're looking at the photo of Leo. He's beautiful, isn't he? He has your eyes, unfortunately. I worry sometimes that he might inherit your temper or your selfishness, but I am working very hard to raise him to be kind. I'm raising him to be a man who respects women, a man who keeps his promises. Everything you never learned how to be. You're probably still wondering how I did it. You always thought you were the smartest person in the room, so this must be driving you mad. It was easier than you think. You were so busy looking at yourself in the mirror, so busy chasing Sienna, that you never noticed the shadow behind you. I knew about the affair for 6 months before I left. I didn't cry. I planned. I started moving the money first, small amounts that your accountant missed because he was too busy helping you hide the bribes. By the time I left, I had siphoned off nearly $5 million into encrypted accounts. That's what funded the new me. The diary? Fiction. I wrote it in a weekend. I researched signs of spousal abuse and crafted a narrative the police would eat up. I knew they would find it. I knew they would believe it, because everyone wants to believe the billionaire is a villain. And Sienna, poor, stupid Sienna. She was the easiest pawn to move. I knew if I put enough pressure on the situation, she would crack. I left that recording for her to find, knowing she would use it to save herself. I knew she would testify against you. You two were perfect for each other, both so willing to destroy anyone to save your own skin. I didn't hire a hitman. I didn't jump off a bridge. I drove to Montreal that night in a rental car paid for in cash. I dyed my hair in a motel sink. I used a passport I bought on the dark web, the one you thought I didn't know how to access. By the time you were calling the police, I was boarding a flight to Paris. We live in Europe now. I won't say where. I have a new name, a new face. A little surgery does wonders. And a new life. You are in a cage of your own making, Ethan. You built the walls with your lies, and you locked the door with your arrogance. I just turned the key. Don't look for us. The Clara you knew is dead. She died the night she found your second phone and realized she was nothing more to you than an obstacle. Leo asks about his father sometimes. I tell him his father is gone. In every way that matters, it's the truth. Enjoy the silence, my love. C. Ethan dropped the letter. The pages scattered on the cold concrete floor. He stared at the photo of Leo, his son, his flesh and blood, living a life of luxury in Europe on his money, raised by the woman who had surgically dismantled his entire existence. A sound bubbled up in Ethan's throat. It started as a groan, but then it twisted. It turned into a laugh, a dry, ragged, hysterical laugh that bounced off the concrete walls. He laughed until his ribs ached. He laughed until tears streamed down his face. She had done it. She had actually done it. She had committed the perfect crime, and he was serving the time for it. Ethan Caldwell, the former king of New York, curled up on his concrete slab, clutching the photo of the boy he would never meet, and stared at the sliver of blue sky. "Well played, Clara," he whispered into the void. "Well played." And then, for the first time in 2 years, the billionaire closed his eyes and wept. So, what is the lesson here? Ethan Caldwell thought he was invincible. He thought he could discard people like used tissues, but he forgot the most dangerous rule of nature. Nothing is more lethal than a woman who has been pushed too far. He lost his fortune, his freedom, and his fatherhood because he underestimated the quiet woman reading a book on the sofa. Clara Vance didn't just survive, she evolved. She orchestrated a masterclass in revenge that left no fingerprints, only consequences. In the end, the billionaire became a prisoner, the mistress became a memory, and the boring wife became the architect of her own destiny. If this story sent shivers down your spine, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What do you think? Did Ethan deserve his fate, or did Clara go too far by keeping his son away? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more twisted tales of karma, revenge, and real-life drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.